Welcome to Vanguard, where humans aren't the underdogs. We're the endgame. Enjoy the journey. Talaris 6 was chaos wrapped in steel and neon. Asher Flame stood in the middle of the central spaceport thoroughfare, like a silent pillar, his steel gray eyes tracking movement through the sea of alien bodies. 37, 38, 39. His mind didn't count for fun. It was habit sharpened over years of dodging bullets and betrayal. Numbers gave him rhythm. Rhythm gave him control. And in a place like this, control was survival. 42, 43. Plasma rifles clattered against chitinous exoskeletons. Tentacled merchants screamed over pricing disputes in 5 different dialects. A group of glitter-skinned Elari dancers tried to push past a pair of armored bounty hunters arguing over a prize. Asher breathed it all in like incense. Most people feared this kind of chaos. He found it soothing. The collar of his black leather jacket itched, and he adjusted it, fingers brushing over the stylized flame insignia embroidered on the back. Harsh artificial lights caught the orange threads, igniting them briefly with a shimmering glow. Beneath his skin, between his shoulder blades, the faint warmth of his mark, no longer a tattoo, not exactly throbbed gently like a heartbeat he didn't quite own. He'd stopped questioning it years ago. Asher Flame, a gravelly voice hissed from his left. Fresh cargo premium stock. Special rate for connected buyers. He turned, expecting another shady offer. Another credit sink for illegal trinkets. Instead, he found himself staring at an 8-foot monstrosity, an armored Kralaxian trade with segmented limbs and gleaming mandibles dragging something behind it. No someone. A woman. She stumbled behind the alien wrists bound in biosteel cuffs, silver hair cascading like liquid moonlight over what had once been a pristine uniform. Her skin was a striking shade of violet, luminous, even in the dim light. Asher's gut clenched. Not because of her beauty, though, that would have made lesser men hesitate, but because of her eyes, sharp, calculating, and above all else, defiant. Even dragged through filth, she held herself like a queen who'd simply misplaced her throne. Rare specimen, the Kralaxian rasped, tapping its claws together. Pure Solare bloodline, military elite, maybe nobility, excellent for collection or companionship. Asher's feet moved before his brain gave permission. 3 long strides. His hand hovered just above his holster, fingers relaxed but ready. The woman noticed him first. Her gaze locked on his. Then, without warning, she spun in the alien's grip and spat directly into its compound eyes. The reaction was instant. The Kralaxian convulsed, every limb twitching. Its mandibles clicked, wildly emitting a sound that resembled a cross between choking and moaning. Then with a shudder, it collapsed to the ground, 8 legs spasming in what could only be described as ecstasy. What the actual hell, Asher muttered. The violet-skinned woman didn't even glance down at her now twitching captor. She calmly straightened her uniform, brushed invisible dust from her silver-trimmed sleeve, and turned to Asher with imperial calm. Then she spat in his face. Warm liquid slid down his cheek, sticky and strangely sweet-smelling. Asher blinked, frozen, processing. No euphoria, no muscle weakness, no anything. Just the raw, wet reality of being spat on by an alien aristocrat. Slowly, deliberately, Asher wiped the saliva from his jaw using 2 fingers and gave her a look that had made warlords back down. "Lady," he said coolly, "I don't know what that meant, but if you try it again, I will spit back." The shift in her expression would have been hilarious under any other circumstance. Her eyes widened, mouth falling open in shock. The icy royal mass shattered in a heartbeat. "You didn't feel it." Feel what, besides disgusted? All around them, the spaceport slowed. Conversations halted. A blue-skinned Juraxian dropped his cargo. 2 Vortexians froze mid-transmission. Hundreds of alien eyes turned toward the 2 figures in the center of the chaos. A human man with an attitude and a violet-skinned noble who looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Impossible," she whispered. "You're human. You should have collapsed in pleasure." "My saliva contains neurotoxins engineered to trigger." Asher cocked an eyebrow. "Sounds like a horrible pickup line." Her gaze dropped to the flame emblem on his jacket, then back to his face. Something new entered her eyes, not curiosity, alarm. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Someone who doesn't like getting spit on." You've just, you've just caused a diplomatic incident of galactic proportions. Asher exhaled. Lady, I'm just here to pick up a shipment of plasma cells. She stepped closer, her voice lowering into a whisper. By Solare law, your refusal of the ceremonial spit, your rejection of the blessing, counts as a direct challenge. Challenge to what? Marriage, or combat to the death. There is no third option. Asher blinked. All that from spit? She nodded solemnly. Congratulations, you may have just accidentally proposed or declared war. And just like that, the universe got a lot more complicated. Asher stood in the stillness of the moment, utterly unimpressed by the diplomatic disaster forming around him like a slow-motion explosion. The woman's violet eyes bore into him with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. Around them, aliens of every size and biology whispered in dozens of languages, but their meaning was the same. He didn't collapse. The Krelixian slave trader was still twitching on the floor behind them, moaning softly as if trapped in a very vivid dream. The scent of burned ozone and perfume like saliva lingered in the air. You're certain you're human? The woman asked, stepping closer. Her tone was that of someone trying to identify an unexploded bomb. Last I checked, Asher replied. 2 arms, 2 legs, permanent caffeine and addiction. Human enough. Her mouth opened, then closed, clearly rerouting several thoughts. You should have been incapacitated. The ceremonial secretion my saliva contains engineered neurobonding agents. Even other Solare find it overwhelming. It's biologically sacred. Asher's expression didn't change. I've eaten food from Earth gas stations. Your spit isn't even in the top 5 weird things I've survived this week. More whispers. The crowd grew thicker. Somewhere in the background, someone started recording. Asher glanced sideways and saw 3 small, hovering record drones blinking red. Great. Viral in 5 systems by sundown. What's your name? She asked sharply, regaining some of her royal tone. Asher Flame, he answered, eyes narrowing. And you? I am Elsie Turina, first daughter of House Turina, ruling bloodline of the Solari Dominium, she said, straightening her shoulders. He gave a dry nod. So, Princess Spitfire. Nice. Her eyes twitched. You don't understand. You have invoked the recognition protocol. My people will now interpret your response as either a refusal of my sacred offering, an insult punishable by death, or an acceptance. Of what he said slowly. She didn't answer, not verbally. Instead, a group of figures began pushing through the stunned crowd, 6 tall guards in violet-trimmed armor, weapons slung across their backs, eyes scanning for threats. Their presence shifted the atmosphere from gossip to tension. As they reached Elsie, the leader saluted sharply. First daughter, we received your signal. Is this the one? His eyes locked onto Asher. Yes, Elsie replied. The human who resisted. Resisted, the guard repeated in awe, almost reverently. Asher took a step back. Okay, hold up. I'm not joining any cult. I don't care how shiny your armor is. You must come with us, Elsie said, low and urgent. Now. No, Asher snapped. I don't follow people with guns just because they're sparkly. I came here to pick up a shipment. Instead, I got hit in the face with extraterrestrial affection and nearly caused a civil war. I'm going to walk away before this gets weirder. Elsie stepped closer, her voice a whisper edged with panic. You don't get it. Talaris 6 has already been locked down. 27 elite Solari warriors surround this entire port. Any attempt to flee will be interpreted as aggression. You either come peacefully, or this ends badly. For everyone. Asher ran through his options. His pulse quickened, but not from fear. 6 guards visible. More hidden. He still had his pistol under his jacket, but if these aliens were even half as fast as the rumor suggested, he wouldn't clear the holster in time. And the way the mark on his back burned suddenly hotter, it was almost like it was warning him. He clenched his jaw. Fine, I'll come. But this is under protest. Noted, Elsie said briskly. The guards flanked him without touching. Even they seemed wary, as if his presence demanded reverence or fear. As they began moving toward a waiting hover transport, Asher glanced sideways at Elsie. Just to clarify, is this whole spitting thing normal in your culture? Because on Earth, that usually leads to a fight. Among my people, she said stiffly, a ceremonial spit is the highest expression of gratitude and potential genetic compatibility. Returning that gesture would either initiate a sacred bond or declare war. Asher groaned. Let me guess. When I threatened to spit back, you triggered a binding recognition, she finished. He stopped walking. Wait, are you telling me that I either agreed to marry you or challenge your house to mortal combat? She turned to him, expression unreadable. Yes. Asher stared at her for a moment, then looked up at the sky like he was waiting for a meteor to finish him off. That has to be the dumbest mating ritual I've ever heard of. It's ancient law, she snapped. Sacred tradition. Well, I've got a sacred tradition called personal boundaries. The guards didn't laugh, but he swore one of them almost cracked a smile. As the hover transport's doors slid open, Elsie turned to him one last time. Don't ever attempt to spit at me again, even as a joke. The ceremonial exchange can only happen once. A second attempt would be considered intimate. Asher raised an eyebrow. You aliens are seriously messed up. Says the species that kisses with their food holes, she replied coolly. Despite everything, Asher let out a short laugh. Touché. He boarded the transport unaware that across the stars, the Dominium's ancient protocols were already in motion. What had begun as an accidental insult was spiraling into a galactic-level crisis. And all because of one damn spit. The interior of the hover transport felt like a cathedral made of glass and tension. Crystalline panels pulsed softly with violet light, reacting to the presence of those inside. Asher sat with his arms crossed, boots planted, wide eyes flicking between the guards and Elsie, who now looked more like a queen than a prisoner. They didn't speak for several minutes. The silence was oppressive, thick with implications and questions neither of them wanted to answer out loud. But the mark on Asher's back, hotter now pulsing steadily, reminded him that whatever this was, it was already bigger than him. So he said, finally, voice casual but sharp as a blade, tell me what kind of mess I'm walking into. And be honest, you owe me that much. Elsie hesitated, then nodded. Very well. The moment you failed to respond to the ceremonial exchange, the recognition protocol was triggered. My people believe it to be fate. Our biobonding rituals are the foundation of our highest laws. When they fail, it's considered a cosmic anomaly. Let me guess, he muttered. An anomaly they usually fix with a firing squad. Or a wedding, she said flatly. Asher closed his eyes and leaned back against the transparent wall. I swear I just wanted to pick up a box of thermal cells and leave, not get tied up in alien courtship and royal contracts. The transport decelerated, and through the tinted panels, he caught his first glimpse of the capital of Talaris 6, and it was nothing like the dusty ports or trade hubs. A massive crystalline city floated above a shimmering violet ocean, suspended by anti-gravity pylons of impossible design. The palace itself looked like a spider web of glass and light stretching into the sky like an organic skyscraper. It was beautiful, and it reeked of trouble. That's your house? He asked, brow raised. Elsie didn't look up from her datapad. That is House Terina, seat of power for the Solari Dominium and my family's ancestral domain. It's also where your fate will be decided. Awesome, Asher muttered. Can't wait to meet the in-laws. The hovercraft touched down on a platform extending from the palace's eastern wing. As the doors hissed open, a contingent of armored guards awaited them, each clad in ceremonial crystal-woven armor, with weapons that looked both ancient and impossibly advanced. Asher stepped out, flanked by the escort, noting how the soldiers subtly shifted positions to surround him. Not aggressive, not quite, but definitely prepared. This is your last chance, Elsie whispered, without turning to him. Before we cross the threshold, you can still claim diplomatic ignorance. I'll take the blame. He studied her face. For all her previous arrogance, her expression now held something else: guilt, regret, maybe even concern. Not my style, he said. Besides, I kind of want to see how deep this hole goes. She gave a short, sharp nod. Then remember, the official story is that we're initiating the recognition protocol willingly. You are a potential consort who responded favorably. He stopped walking. You mean when I wiped your spit off my face and told you to back off? Yes, she hissed. Do not say that, ever. If word gets out that you didn't experience the bonding effect, it will be seen as a desecration of sacred biology. I would be executed for dishonor. You'd be dissected. Great, Asher said. Alien romance is just nonstop fun. The palace doors loomed ahead 12 meters tall, forged from translucent crystal that shimmered like frozen starlight. As they opened, a low hum filled the air. Beyond was the Hall of Judgment, where hundreds of violet-skinned nobles stood in formation, their eyes turned in unison toward the human. Asher adjusted the collar of the formal black suit they'd insisted he wear tight-fitting, accented with flame orange crystal. He looked like a ceremonial torch. "Just breathe," Elsie said beside him. "I do that best under fire," he replied. At the far end of the hall, a deep chime rang out, and the massive doors swung open again. A hush fell across the chamber as a tall salarié male entered, moving with slow, deliberate grace. His skin was darker than Elsie's, almost indigo, and his silver robe shimmered like moonlight on water. Sovereign Dominus Terrena, Lord of the Seven Houses, Keeper of the Eternal Flame. That last title made the mark on Asher's back burn like a brand. The sovereign stopped before Asher, eyes scanning him slowly. They were old eyes, ancient, calculating, unreadable. So the sovereign said, voice deep and calm, "This is the one who survived my daughter's blessing." Asher didn't flinch. "She spit on me. That's not usually how first contact goes where I'm from." A collective gasp moved through the nobility like a wave. Elsie jumped in. "Father Mr. Flame's physiology simply reacts differently to our bonding agents. It's not an insult, just a variation." The sovereign ignored her. "Do you understand what the recognition protocol entails, human?" "I'm starting to get the picture," Asher replied. "From what I gather, I either marry your daughter or die horribly," which is very inclusive, by the way. 3 beats of silence. Then slowly the sovereign smiled. "Refreshing honesty," he said. "Very well. Let the human undergo the evaluation period. 7 cycles to determine compatibility." Elsie exhaled quietly. Asher tilted his head. "And if I flunk compatibility?" The sovereign's smile didn't waver. "Then we shall revisit the second option." Asher had survived Deathworld's bounty ambushes and one very unfortunate stint on a diplomatic ship infested with psychic fungus. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for dinner with 8 alien aristocrats who all shared the same last name and the same deadly glint in their eyes. The dining hall of House Terrena was less a room and more an architectural statement of power. The crystalline walls refracted the glow of 3 setting suns, casting swirling patterns of violet and silver across a table, long enough to host interstellar peace talks and tense enough to start a new war over appetizers. Asher sat beside Elsie, who had somehow shifted overnight from hostile spit thrower to his reluctant co-strategist in survival. Across from him sat the sovereign, impassive as ever, slicing into some pulsing bioluminescent delicacy with surgical grace. But it was the seats to Asher's left and right that worried him. 8 women, all daughters of the sovereign, all sisters of Elsie, all staring at him like he was a very rare steak and they hadn't eaten in weeks. The one seated directly across from him was tall, statuesque, and wore her silver hair in an elaborate crown braid. She introduced herself as Morarana, second daughter of House Terrena. Her eyes scanned him not with curiosity, but with cool clinical assessment. "A curious choice," Sister Morarana said, her voice smooth as glass. "I'd expected someone more evolved." Charmed, Asher replied dryly. "You sound like my ex's mother." To his right, a shorter woman with an athletic build leaned closer, her sharp eyes glittering with amusement. "Does he do tricks?" she asked. "I heard humans were trainable." Talia Elsie warned, her voice sharp. "I mostly do disappearing acts," Asher said, keeping a straight face. "Usually after making things explode." A few of the nobles snorted into their wine. Morarana didn't even blink. On his left, a younger sister, barely adult by human standards, slid her chair unnervingly close. Her name was Virilia, and her eyes practically glowed with hatred. "Your presence here is an abomination," she whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. "Humans are barely sentient by Dominium standards." Virilia Elsie snapped. "That's enough." "Is it?" Virilia said, standing slowly. "You select a primitive for consort when dozens of noble houses have petitioned for alliance. This reeks of sabotage." Asher casually sipped the strange fizzy drink in front of him. "You know," he said, "on Earth when someone says hello, we usually don't follow it with 'you're subhuman.'" Another sister, soft-voiced, all sweetness on the surface, leaned in next. Or is this simply a clever maneuver? Elsie, she asked. Select a consort no one can take seriously. That way you keep Father's favor without real threat. I'm standing right here, Asher said. Yes, Morana replied. Unfortunately, you are. The rest of the dinner passed like a fencing match. Only the weapons were layered, sarcasm, veiled threats, and far too many ceremonial dishes that wiggled when you looked at them. By the time dessert arrived, some kind of floating jellyfish flower, still technically alive, Asher had mentally cataloged which sisters wanted to bed him, kill him, or both. He also noticed something odd. His flame mark was pulsing, but not in warning. It was reacting. To them. Why are they all staring at me like I'm some kind of myth? He asked quietly as they stood from the table. They're not used to anomalies, Elsie replied, or threats they didn't plan for. Asher followed her through the palace's crystalline halls. She moved like a blade sheathed in silk, composed but constantly calculating. He respected it. What's the evaluation period actually involve, he asked. Cultural testing, she said. Symbolic rituals, ancestral compatibility matrices. Sounds kinky. She shot him a sideways glare. And restraint. Lots of restraint. Not my strong suit. I noticed. They arrived at a towering set of double doors inlaid with flame-colored crystal. Your quarters, Elsie said. Asher raised a brow. Not staying for a nightcap. She didn't flinch. We're barely avoiding planetary collapse. This isn't the time for jokes. He leaned against the frame. I wasn't joking. Her expression faltered for half a second. Good night, Mr. Flame. But just as she turned to leave, something strange happened. The youngest sister, Virilia, appeared out of nowhere, bumping accidentally into Asher. A spray of warm liquid hit his collar. She had spit at him. Oh, come on, he snapped, wiping his shoulder. Again. Virilia didn't apologize. She hissed, You'd never be worthy of the flame, and stormed off. Elsie stared after her jaw clenched. She's trying to trap you, Elsie muttered. Any reaction, even flinching, could trigger a secondary recognition chain. They're testing for resonance. Resonance, he asked. The physiological response to genetic compatibility, she said quietly. It only occurs between soul-paired individuals of celery blood. He blinked. And you think I might? I don't think, she said. I fear. She left him with that cryptic admission and vanished into the shadows of the corridor. Alone now, Asher stood in the opulent room meant to host an alien prince. He pulled off his jacket and sat on the edge of the crystalline bed, staring out at the 3 violet moons of Talaris 6. The flame on his back pulsed once, then twice harder this time, as if something ancient and buried was finally starting to wake up. The palace of House Tarina was quiet at night, but never silent. Subtle vibrations hummed through the crystalline walls, defensive harmonics, ancestral memory banks, biometric surveillance nodes. Asher Flame lay awake on the obsidian-smooth bed, staring at the ceiling as geometric constellations shifted above him in soft pulses of violet and flame-orange light. He should have felt tired. Instead, the mark between his shoulder blades throbbed like a second heartbeat, warm and rhythmic, as if it was trying to tell him something. Enough, he muttered, sitting up. The moment his bare feet touched the floor, the room responded. Ambient light, soft and scrolls of ancient Salari script appeared midair. The palace had learned his presence. It was adapting, or recognizing him. He stepped toward a tall mirror embedded with glowing sigils. As he turned his back to it, he saw the mark again. Not a tattoo, not ink. A living thing, a twisting flame-shaped symbol that shimmered like it was alive beneath his skin. Then came the voice. Not from the palace. From within, you carry our fire. Asher froze. Blood diluted, yes. But the flame remembers. What the hell, he whispered, eyes scanning for comm units or hidden speakers. Nothing. You are not only human, you are what was exiled, what they feared. His breath caught. The mark flared hotter, bright enough that it cast shadows on the wall. Suddenly the mirror rippled. His reflection twisted, morphed. His face remained, but behind his eyes danced fire. His skin shimmered faintly with energy, and his voice, his own, spoke again, but deeper, layered with resonance. You are of the flame-born. And then just like that, it stopped. The mirror returned to normal. The mark dimmed. The room stilled. He was left with silence and sweat. Moments later, a soft chime rang at the door. Asher grabbed his jacket but didn't put it on. He didn't need more heat on his back. The door slid open. Elsie stood there, hair down, robe loose, face tense. "You felt it," she said. It wasn't a question. Asher stepped aside. "Come in." She entered slowly, her gaze lingering on the mark still glowing faintly on his skin. "You should have told me sooner," he said. "I didn't know how," she admitted, "and I wasn't certain until I saw the palace reacting to you." Asher crossed his arms. "Start talking, all of it." Elsie walked to the center of the room and activated a projection orb. A hologram burst forth, ancient Solare figures wreathed in flame, standing above a burning city. 5 centuries ago, she began, "Our people weren't like this." The Solare were born with the inner flame, a biological phenomenon tied to the core of our planet. It gave us power, strength, resilience, energy, manipulation. But we grew afraid of it. The hologram shifted, war, destruction, cities turned to glass. The aristocracy declared it unstable, dangerous. Those with the inner flame were exiled to distant stars, abandoned. Asher watched the display. One of the exiled ships showed a familiar pattern, Earth's solar system. "You sent them to Earth." Elsie nodded. "We erased the records, pretended the Flameborn never existed, until now." She turned to him, her voice quieter. "I took a genetic sample after our first encounter. I had to be sure." And he asked, "You're roughly 1/8 Solari. The flame doesn't show up in your genome like ours. It's mutated deeper, fused with human cellular structure. That's why our biochemistry doesn't work on you. It's why the recognition ritual failed." "It didn't fail," Asher said. "It short-circuited." Elsie hesitated, then stepped closer. "The palace recognizes you. The mark you carry, it's not just a brand. It's a key." "To what?" "To the Flame Covenant." He frowned. "That sounds like a cult or a really intense spa package." "It's neither. It's the last safeguard of our world. A fail-safe locked behind ancestral bloodlines. Only a direct descendant of the Flameborn can activate it. And let me guess," he said, voice dry, "things are about to get bad enough that you need it." Elsie's eyes shimmered with something between fear and hope. "The Dominium is fracturing. There are factions who want to return to the old ways. Others want to destroy the past. And with you here alive, active, the balance could tip." Asher took a breath. "You said earlier I had a choice, marriage or death." She nodded. "And now," she looked up at him, "now you may be our only chance at survival." Silence settled between them like fog. Asher stepped back, staring again at the mirror, his reflection flickering faintly with flame. He'd never asked for any of this. He didn't want a throne, didn't want prophecy. He wanted peace, a good cup of coffee, maybe a dog. Instead, the universe handed him ancient power, a genetically incompatible spit ritual, and a royal family with more knives than hugs. And yet, the flame pulsed again. Not warning, not anger. "Purpose. I need air," he said finally. Elsie didn't stop him. She just whispered one thing before he left. "The flame remembers, and so will they." The grand hall of illumination glowed like a living constellation. Thousands of crystal chandeliers hovered midair, refracting moonlight from the triple lunar sky into slow-moving auroras that danced across polished obsidian floors. Nobles glided across the ballroom like silk over water, dressed in shimmering robes, skin tones ranging from moonlight blue to deep indigo silver hair, woven into impossible shapes. At the heart of it all stood Asher Flame, and he hated every second. The black ceremonial suit they'd tailored for him was tight in all the wrong places and adorned with flame orange crystal inlays that perfectly matched the mark on his back, which wouldn't stop pulsing. He'd tried ignoring it, but now it felt like a second spine, a burning, judgmental spine. At his side, Elsie looked like a goddess sculpted from violet starlight. Her gown shimmered with molecular silk, her hair braided into loops that defied physics, and her voice was cool as the distant moons when she whispered, "Smile." He didn't. "I'm surrounded by 1,000 aliens who either want to stab me or seduce me," he muttered. "I don't do well at weddings, let alone galactic evaluations." "You're not being evaluated by everyone," she replied. "Just the ones with access to armies." "Oh, well, that's comforting." Music began soft at first, played on instruments that looked like living glass. Nobles moved into formation for a slow, ritualistic dance. Elsie extended her hand. We must dance at least once. It's part of the protocol. Asher took her hand reluctantly. I'm warning you now. I don't know your steps. Then improvise. Their first movement drew attention like a black hole drew light. Asher didn't know the exact mechanics of Solare's ceremonial dance, but his instincts sharpened over years of staying alive led him through. He mirrored Elsie's movements, pivoted on cues too subtle for most to see. And strangely, it worked. It worked too well. On their third step, their hands brushed, and the air shattered. A surge of energy leapt between them like a bolt of lightning. Not metaphorically, literally. A crackling arc of flame-colored light snapped from Asher's fingertips to Elsie's wrist. The music stuttered. The crowd gasped. Both of them jerked back, stunned. Asher blinked. Did you just— Resonance, Elsie whispered, her voice full of dread. A ripple of gasps spread like wildfire. In the crowd, a dozen nobles leaned closer. Servants dropped trays. Scribes began recording. Whispers tore through the ballroom like wind through dry grass. You said humans in Solare couldn't. They can't, Elsie said. They never have. She backed away from him, hand trembling, expression lost between fascination and fear. From across the ballroom, Morirana moved forward with the elegance of a predator. So it's true, she purred, her silver hair coiled high in a ceremonial crest. You resonate with our sister. Fascinating. Before Asher could respond, Talia, the athletic sister, swooped in next. But perhaps he can resonate with more than one, she suggested playfully. Then came Virilia, gliding toward him like a blade cloaked in silk. Or perhaps he's simply compatible with power, not people, she said coldly. Elsie stepped between Asher and her sisters, fire in her eyes. Enough. This is not the time. But the sisters weren't listening. Morirana stumbled. An elegant misstep, except it was no accident. She turned her head and spit a fine mist aimed straight for Asher's cheek. He dodged with practiced ease. You've got to be kidding me. Talia gasped theatrically. Oh no, I was just startled by the music, she said, as she accidentally exhaled toward his collar. Virilia didn't even pretend. If one peasant spit binds a nation, imagine what 3 noble doses could do. She growled and lunged. Asher sidestepped them all faster than any of them expected. He moved with the precision of a soldier and the patience of a man used to handling chaos. On Earth, he muttered, adjusting his cuffs, we use dating apps. Much less saliva involved. Across the room, Elsie's eyes met his. They both laughed quietly, warily, but for the first time together. And for the first time, Asher realized he wasn't alone in this mess. She was fighting too. Different stakes, same battlefield. But not everyone found the moment touching. From the shadows, a group of older nobles whispered rapidly in encoded frequencies. Others subtly left the ballroom, tapping at devices. Power was shifting. Factions were aligning. Someone had just rewritten biological history and they didn't like it. Later that night, after the ballroom emptied, Asher stood alone on a balcony overlooking the endless cityscape. Violet moons shimmered across the ocean. The palace's crystal towers sparkled like watchful eyes. He heard her approach before she spoke. You handled yourself well, Elsie said, stepping beside him. She had changed out of her ceremonial gown, now dressed in a simple robe of deep indigo. I dodged 3 attempts at alien seduction by spit and didn't set anyone on fire, he said. I call that a win. She smiled faintly. It was more than that. They stood in silence for a moment. Why me? He asked finally. Why did your spit trigger this? Why now? Why any of this? Elsie looked up at him, eyes shimmering with something between fear and awe. Because the flame doesn't make mistakes. It remembers what was lost, and it chooses when to return. Then softly, you're not just human, Asher. You're what my ancestors feared, and maybe what my people need. He didn't answer, but the mark on his back flared again. Not in pain. In agreement? The alarm screamed through the palace like banshees. Crimson light bathed the crystalline halls, turning beauty into chaos. Guards sprinted through corridors. Nobles stumbled from their chambers, in half-wrapped robes, confusion etched into every elegant face. Elsie stood frozen beside Asher on the balcony, her eyes wide with dawning horror. What is it? Asher asked, already sliding his jacket over his bare shoulders. The mark on his back pulsed hot, urgent. Elsie's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. Proximity alert. Multiple unauthorized vessels entering orbit. They ran. Through spiraling halls and shimmering archways, their footsteps echoing louder than the sirens. By the time they reached the central command chamber, an enormous dome of living crystal, laced with silver interface nodes. The sovereign was already there, flanked by generals, advisors, and 7 very tense daughters. A massive holographic display dominated the room, showing the Talaris star system in chilling clarity. Dozens of red triangles blinked near the outer rim, moving fast, too fast. Incoming fleet, announced a military officer. Configuration matches known Imperial warships. Estimated time to weapons range 26 minutes. A stunned silence followed. Elsie stepped forward, voice cutting through the dread. They're violating the Concord, the neutral zone. They claim to be responding to a distress signal, the Sovereign said coldly. Something about political instability within the Dominium. Asher's jaw tightened. How convenient. Right when your succession is being questioned. Right when your daughter bonds with an anomaly. He looked around at the nobles. Someone called them from inside. Whispers broke out. Eyes darted to one another. Virilia stepped forward. What an accusation. You dare insult our bloodline in our own halls? Save it, Asher growled. You tried to spit bind me at the ball and failed. Now your Empire friends show up real subtle. The Sovereign turned to his tacticians. Activate planetary defense grid. One of them paled. We already attempted that, Sovereign. Primary systems are unresponsive. 3 of 5 defense nodes report total failure. Another voice, this one robotic sabotage confirmed. A heavy silence fell. Elsie turned to Asher. We need to talk, now. He followed her without hesitation, weaving through terrified courtiers until they reached a hidden alcove. A panel slid open at her palm print, revealing a narrow spiral staircase descending into the heart of the palace. Where are we going? Asher asked, his flame mark now searing against his skin. To the truth, she said grimly. They descended for what felt like miles deeper and deeper beneath the palace. The air thickened with heat and static. The walls became older, less polished, more raw. Living crystal fused with metallic veins. The further they went, the more Asher felt the flame inside him stir. It wasn't discomfort. It was recognition. At last they emerged into a vast circular chamber. The ceiling stretched beyond sight, vanishing into dark geometry. At the center of the room pulsed a massive column of firelight, not flame exactly, but energy that looked alive. Asher stepped toward it. His spine lit up like a fuse. Elsie moved to a glowing pedestal. Her voice echoed off the chamber walls. This is the heart chamber, the core of Talaris 6's planetary defense, a relic left by our ancestors before the purging of the Flameborn. It cannot be activated by any living Solare. He turned to her, except me. She nodded. Your bloodline carries the flame's genetic key. You are descended from those we exiled. You can ignite what we can no longer touch. He stared at the column, and if I don't, we lose the planet. He exhaled slowly. That's a hell of a family reunion. Elsie walked closer, her tone shifting. Asher, there's more. If you activate the Flame Covenant by ancient law, you become the planet's protector, its rightful sovereign. He turned sharply. You're telling me activating this thing puts me on the throne? Yes. And you bring me here now because what you trust me, or you're out of options. I'm out of time, she admitted, voice low. But I also believe you're more than what we feared. I believe the flame chose you. Asher studied her, really studied her. For all her poise, her perfect posture, the centuries of breeding and training, there was fear in her eyes. Not of him, of losing everything. And despite himself, he felt something crack open inside him. Not obligation, not destiny, something personal. I don't want your throne, he said quietly. I don't want your power, but I won't let them take this planet because some rich kid got scared of a little fire 500 years ago. Elsie smiled faintly, then ignited. As he stepped toward the pedestal, the flame on his back roared to life, illuminating the chamber with orange light. Symbols blazed to life around him. The column of energy stirred, responding, recognizing. And far above in the war room, the Sovereign watched as the chamber's ancient systems came online for the first time in centuries. He's doing it, one noble whispered, and in orbit Imperial warships prepared to open fire. The heart chamber vibrated like a living engine of ancient will. Energy surged through crystal veins embedded in the walls, glowing in tandem with the marks searing between Asher's shoulder blades. The pedestal pulsed before him, a shallow depression carved into its center, a perfect mirror of his flame mark. "Are you sure?" Elsie asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Once it begins, it cannot be undone." Asher turned to her, slowly, eyes shadowed by the flickering light behind him. "I didn't ask for this," he said, "but if I walk away now, your people burn. That's not how I was raised." He peeled off his jacket and shirt in one motion. The living flame across his back surged forward, no longer content to be dormant. It glowed bright as sunrise, shifting like molten metal trapped under skin. He stepped forward and pressed his back into the pedestal. The effect was immediate. A low hum filled the chamber building to a crescendo. The mark on his back began to liquefy, flowing down like a stream of molten light into the ancient stone, matching perfectly with the shape it was always destined to fit. Then the world changed. A blinding pulse of white-orange light exploded from the chamber's core, sending shockwaves through the palace above. The city trembled. Distant oceans cracked and reformed as dormant tectonics responded to the awakening signal. And in orbit, Imperial weapons targeting systems blinked into static as the planet itself began to transform. Back in the command dome, nobles shielded their eyes as ancient terminals sparked to life. The sovereign took a step forward, staring in disbelief as the defense grid, dormant for over 500 years, lit up like a second sun. "Impossible," someone whispered. "It's real," the sovereign said, his voice reverent. "The covenant lives." In the heart chamber, Asher's body arched, not from pain but from pressure. It was like the weight of an entire civilization was being channeled through his spine. He saw images and flashes, Solari warriors cloaked in flame, lost cities, exiled ancestors launching into the void. He saw Earth from orbit. He saw himself, and he saw what was coming. "You are the return. You are the reckoning. You are the fire we buried, and the fire we now need." Energy surged upward, traveling through spires embedded deep in the crust, rushing toward the planet's surface. High above towers unfolded ancient cannons, rotating from dormant craters, drawing power not from reactors, but from the planet's molten core. The Flame Covenant wasn't just defense, it was divine judgment. As the Imperial fleet fired their first volley, the planetary shield flared to life. Beams of plasma, kinetic rods, even gravitic pulses. All were absorbed harmlessly by the glowing barrier now enveloping Talaris 6. Then with majestic silence, the flame retaliated. Columns of light erupted from the defense towers, weaving like serpents through space. One by one, enemy ships were dismantled at the molecular level, not exploding, not even burning, but unmade, reduced to vapor and memory. Within 4 minutes, the entire Imperial fleet retreated, crippled, broken, and terrified. Inside the chamber, the light dimmed. Asher collapsed to his knees, breathing hard sweat pouring down his chest. The pedestal cooled. The mark on his back faded to a soft ember glow. He looked up and saw every member of the High Court entering the chamber. The sovereign walked slowly toward him, followed by Elsie and her 7 sisters. There was no music, no fanfare, just reverence. The sovereign dropped to one knee. "By ancient law, by blood and by fire, you are the flame bearer. The throne is yours by right." Others followed suit. One by one, nobles fell to their knees, bowing before him. Asher stood slowly, chest still rising and falling, power still humming through his bones. "I don't want your throne," he said. "I didn't do this for power." Moirana stepped forward. "Then why?" He looked at Elsie, their eyes locked. "Because she asked," he said simply. Murmurs, shock, confusion. Then Virilia spoke. "He cannot walk away. The flame has chosen. It is binding." Elsie stepped forward, voice sharp. "The flame chooses truth, not tradition." Talia added, "And he saved us when no one else could." The sovereign stood. "The title must still be given." Asher sighed. "Fine, but call me king and I quit." A pause. Then a chuckle from the sovereign. "Then you shall be flame bearer, protector of the dominium." A sovereign without a crown, a title without chains. Asher rolled his shoulders. "That I can live with." Behind the court, Elsie smiled softly. But the peace didn't last long. Several sisters suddenly surged forward, their postures now hungry, predatory. The flame bearer must be honored, purred Moirana, fingers brushing his arm. Our bloodline would be strengthened with your legacy. Perhaps you shouldn't limit yourself to just one sister, Talia whispered. One more reached for his chest. And then Elsie was between them, regal and furious. Back off. He has already chosen his consort. Verilia crossed her arms. I don't recall hearing his declaration. All eyes turned to Asher. He sighed, then smirked. On Earth, we have this wild thing called dating before marriage. Let's start there. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Even the sovereign smiled. But in the shadowed corners of the palace, not everyone was amused. Some watched Asher with awe, others with envy, and some with fear, because the flame had awakened, and with it, so had destiny. 1 year later, Talaris 6 no longer resembled the fractured paranoid empire it once was. The triple moon shone down on a capital, reborn its streets, humming with commerce, its skies filled with peaceful vessels from 17 species. And at the heart of it all stood the monument. 2 figures carved in living crystal and burning flame. One tall human, the Flameborn. The other regal, violet-skinned, her silver hair flowing like starlight. The inscription below read, one spit, one human, one new era. At the ceremonial podium, Elsie Terina stood in full regalia, her once rigid posture softened by something deeper earned authority. She looked out over the gathered dignitaries, a sea of alien faces representing former enemies, now unified under peace. We gather today, she said, voice clear as crystal, to sign the first ever free coalition treaty between the Solare Dominium and the Human Confederation. Muted applause followed, dignified but cautious. Then Asher Flame stepped beside her, dressed in a black suit, trimmed in flame-orange collar, slightly open as usual. Royalty's most unwilling champion, he placed a hand lightly at the small of her back. The gesture was casual, but the living flame pulsed through his shirt for all to see. Not the most traditional way to start an alliance, he said, smirking. But to be fair, Earth doesn't exactly have a handbook for diplomatic saliva warfare. Laughter broke out, genuine this time. Even the sovereign chuckled from his seat in the front row. He had since abdicated his throne, choosing to found a galactic academy for leadership, where politics was now taught with Asher's image, projected sometimes as hero, sometimes as cautionary tale. Behind him, Elsie's sisters sat in various positions of power. Talia, now commander of Asher's personal security detail, scanned the crowd with lethal focus. Moirana, ever the opportunist, had spun the Flamebearer saga into an empire-spanning modeling brand. Verilia was still technically in exile on a luxury moon resort, but sent weekly encrypted messages ranging from half-hearted threats to oddly affectionate updates. As the treaty was signed with ceremonial plasma ink, dignitaries bowed, not to tradition, not to the Dominium, to what had changed, and to the man who had changed it. Later that evening, in the Flamebearer's private quarters, Asher lay sprawled across a hovering crystal bed, watching patterns of living fire ripple across the vaulted ceiling. Beside him, Elsie lay curled into his side, her silver hair cascading over his chest. You wore the collar open again, she murmured. It's tradition, he replied. No, it's rebellion. Same thing on Earth. She chuckled softly, then went quiet. Asher glanced at her. What's wrong? She lifted his hand and placed it gently on her abdomen. At first he felt nothing, then a subtle pulse, not unlike the one on his back but smaller, softer, new. He whispered. She nodded, confirmed by the geneticist 2 days ago. He sat up slowly. Why didn't you tell me? She looked at him with eyes both fierce and vulnerable. Because I wasn't sure what it meant. Not for you, not for them. He blinked, stunned. You think I'd run? I think you've been running your whole life. Silence fell. Then Asher laughed, low, disbelieving, warm. I blew up warlords, survived your sister's spit traps, turned an imperial fleet into dust, and this is what makes me nervous. She smiled. Is it dangerous, he asked. No, but unique. The child is a fusion. Human physiology, Solari biology, and the flame. Asher placed both hands on her belly, feeling the pulse again, tiny but unmistakable. Something alive, something impossible. That kid's going to be stubborn, he muttered. Takes after their mother. Elsie raised an eyebrow. Says the man who argued with a prophecy. He leaned down, brushing his lips across her forehead. Whatever comes, we burn through it together. From the window, the three moons bathed them in violet light. Outside, the newly unified capital glowed peaceful for the first time in centuries. Ships from across the galaxy docked without fear. Trade flowed freely, cultures intertwined. And beneath it all, the flame covenant pulsed gently, no longer a weapon of vengeance, but a beacon of unity. Later, as they drifted into sleep, Elsie murmured, "You know, none of this would have happened if I hadn't spat in your face." Asher grinned in the dark. "And I still might spit back one day. Just saying." She propped herself up on one elbow, eyes gleaming. "Only if you're ready to be a father again." He froze. "Wait, again?" She nodded, wicked smile forming. He groaned. "We are so doomed." Their laughter filled the chamber, honest, exhausted, victorious. Through the living crystal, above the stars shimmered. A new future had been born. From fire, from defiance, from a single sacred spit. The spaceport of Talaris 6, once a chaotic hub of smugglers and mercenaries, now stood reborn, the heart of galactic diplomacy. Above its gates rose the monument of a cord carved from living crystal interlaced with tendrils of stabilized flame. It shimmered under the triple moons visible from orbit. Two figures stood back to back atop its apex. One human wreathed in burning light, one Solari regal and calm, hair caught forever in crystalline motion. Together they symbolized the end of an empire and the birth of an era. The inscription below had been translated into all 12 major galactic languages. From flame and defiance came unity. From a single spit, 1,000 treaties. Inside the Coalition Council Hall, hundreds of delegates filled tiered balconies. The inaugural summit of the Free Species Accord was about to begin, hosted not by the Dominium, not by Earth, but by a union that had rewritten the rules. And at the center of it all, Asher Flame. He stood at the main podium wearing his flame-bearer regalia, a black coat streaked with glowing orange veins. The living symbol on his back, now permanently visible, no longer a secret but a sigil of rebirth. Elsie approached from behind, resplendent in her ceremonial robes, now marked with both House Tarina's crest and the simplified flame insignia. She took her place beside him, her hand brushing lightly against his. The chamber silenced as she spoke first. "We once believed strength came from purity, that our bloodlines and rituals defined our place in the cosmos. But we were wrong." She turned to Asher. "Because this man, this impossible hybrid, stood between extinction and salvation. Not because he was chosen by prophecy, but because he chose us." Asher stepped forward, scanning the gathered species, scaled, furred, feathered, even spectral. "Look, I'll be honest," he said. "I'm not a politician. I'm not a priest. Hell, I came here a year ago looking for a shipment of plasma cells, not to start a galactic revolution." Muffled laughter rippled through the crowd. "But I've seen what happens when power becomes heritage and truth becomes ritual. I've watched civilizations burn because someone said that's how it's always been done." He paused. "I'm here because I spit back." Gasps, grins, murmurs of admiration. Asher pointed toward the balcony where a small girl peeked out, silver-haired, with faint golden veins visible in her skin and flame-colored irises that shimmered when she blinked. "My daughter was born between worlds. She's not the first of her kind, but she won't be the last, and if we're smart, she won't need to be." Silence. Then thunderous applause. Across the tiers, beings stood in unison, some saluting, some bowing, all acknowledging the truth. The flame had not returned to destroy, it had returned to rebuild. Later that night, long after the ceremony ended and the dignitaries had dispersed, Asher walked alone beneath the open sky. The air was quiet. The stars for once held no threat, only promise. He reached the base of the monument and stood in its shadow, gazing up at the likeness that now bore his face. Behind him, Elsie approached, now barefoot and free of robes, hair unbound and shimmering in the moonlight. "You didn't burn anything today," she teased. "I'm evolving," he said, "though I almost torched that delegate from Vernac when he called me your sizzliness." She laughed, leaning against him. "You handled it well." He wrapped an arm around her waist, resting his other hand on her stomach. "Do you think she'll remember this?" he asked. "Our daughter." Elsie looked up at the monument. "She won't need to," she said softly. "The stars will." They stood in silence, two souls once torn by bloodlines and war, now united by choice and fire. In the distance, the flame covenant pulsed again, no longer a warning system, but a beacon, a lighthouse in the void, an invitation. Come, build something new. Asher kissed her temple. You know, he murmured, I still owe you for that first spit. She grinned. Careful. A second exchange is considered deeply intimate. Oh no, he said mock seriously. Not intimacy. They laughed. And somewhere deep beneath the crust of Talaris 6, the living flame echoed their joy. For it knew, as all things born of heat and chaos do, some empires rise by conquest, others by ceremony, but the greatest legacies are built, one spit at a time.